France has decided to bring back its ambassador. And so, in the coming hours, our ambassador with several diplomats will return to France, and we are ending our military cooperation with the de facto authorities of Niger because they no longer want to fight against terrorism.
What's up, family? This is your man, not your boy. Go Black to Africa. You know, here it is, Niger has been on the main screen as far as reports that they kicked out the French. Hooray, hooray. And the French succeeded. But the interesting thing is the French want to tell the world that they have been kicked out because Niger has no need for them to help fight terrorists. You know, it just happened that in July, there was a military uprising and takeover of their government. Now, they would say it's a coup, as though it's a negative thing. Now, I say a coup is like debt. There's good debt and there's bad debt. You see, sometimes when people get tired of the government that is in place, there's an uprising, there's a revolution, so that there are people who wants to change how things are because people are suffering, the country's not advancing, and that the top keeps getting richer and the bottom keeps getting poorer. Well, this governmental body decided that this military would take over, and yet they had the French ambassador move because they have no need, as they said, for the French. Listen to this, and I'll be back.
Some context now. Niger is currently under military rule. Soldiers deposed the elected president in July. Their enemy number one is France now. Paris has deployed around 1,500 soldiers in the country, in Niger. It's part of an anti-terror operation. But Niger's junta says, we don't need your help. Around late August, they issued a deadline. The French ambassador had to leave in 48 hours. Macron said, no way. He said the ambassador would stay in Niger's capital. So what has changed now? Why has Macron made this U-turn? Maybe because it's a losing battle. The junta has settled into their new job. They've announced a new government. They've even appointed 21 ministers. So the time to reverse the coup is gone. The ECOWAS has also lost interest. ECOWAS is a bloc of West African countries. They had threatened to use force to reverse the coup. All words, no action. So Macron had two options. A, he could stick to defiance, keep the French soldiers and diplomats in Niger. Or B, he could live to fight another day. And the French president has chosen option number 2. He would have considered the security situation as well, because the pictures were scary. Protesters had surrounded the French military base. They carried coffins with French flags, even dressed up goats in French colors to slit their throat. So the public sentiment was dangerous. Plus the junta was putting pressure. Earlier this month, Macron had said his ambassador was being held hostage, that food had been cut off. So the current situation was not viable. President Macron alluded to that. He said France will not be held hostage by the military. Listen in.
It is the end of this cooperation because we are not here to participate in political life, to be hostages in some way to the putschists. But I will be very clear. We already see it today in Mali.
What do you think? Let me say this right here. When somebody tells you to get out of your house, how can you be defiant and say you're not going? Because the French have been resisting removing themselves out of the Niger country for the last years, as well as other African countries. I'll do a video on Chad, what's happening over there. No different than Mali. That's been going over there. Burkina Faso. Over 13 countries have been controlled by the French when they were colonized years ago. But the interesting thing is that we see that Niger is wanting to do their own thing. But why is it that the French are so resistant in leaving? Well, that's right. You know, when you have resources that your country depends on, and you've been raping, robbing, and pillaging that country for their resources, and you know now that when you're put out, you don't get those goods, you're subject to lose all that you have. And many of the African countries that have been controlled by the French, under the auspices of providing security for the country, they realize that they have been getting pennies on a dollar when it comes to either getting their own resources, exporting their own goods, with only the return of goods being returned with high profitable interest for those Western countries. But let me say this right here. You know, it seems that the military who have taken over their previous government have already lined up their government seats, getting together their administration and wanting to move forward. But it is that this national or international interest of Niger, as though that they are the bad guys. I've said this before. There is good coups and bad coups. When you are trying to remove a puppet out of place, and a puppet is nothing more than a leader whose strings are being pulled by the West to do what they say. They provided him his own personal security. They provided him millions of dollars to run the country in the way that these Western countries want. His family members will be taken care of. His children will be sent over to lavish colleges and lifestyles of living, while the rest of the country suffers. So when there are uprisings, they tell you a coup was started, and yet because this coup has removed this government, the country is being threatened with future terrorist actions that might come up against them. But who are the terrorists? My brothers and sisters, I have 20 years of experience, been serving in a military, in intelligence as well, and I'm telling you this right here. You must know your history. You see, democracy has been spread just like communists have been spread, just like socialism has been spread. No different than Christianity has been spread around the globe, as well as Islam has been spread around the globe, that created wars. When you don't comply, you die. And this has been an arm wrestling contest for thousands of years. Who can spread their so-called demands or their ideologies on other countries and nations? And those who have the strongest military typically is going to win. I'm saying to the African countries, hold your ground. Stay and unify, because the world will see, even if they brought in all of their military, they cannot defeat a person who's willing to die for a cause. When people rise up, men, women, children, rise up and stand up against the enemy and say, we will die for our children's future, the world will see who the enemy really is. This is how the civil rights movement was able to make headway, when there was no fight against these racist people, and yet the world got to see the spitting on black people, the throwing of the rocks on black people, the hosing by the fire departments, the beating by the police, the sicking of the dogs on black people. When we stood our ground and we did not even raise a finger, it sent the message around the world who the evil people were. So now they can't say these people are terrorists or terrorists are coming in. But so that you know, because I know the history and I know the ways of these Western worlds, what you hear of a terrorist taking over countries are only manned and are actually funded by the Western. The Western worlds are the ones who are fighting for democracy back in the seats of these elected officials' positions. They are wanting to make sure they can secure these countries as allies, so that other countries like Russia, like China, won't come in and sit a military base in these countries that can be closer to American soil, that they will pose as a threat. This is why Europe and America are so fearful of these things happening when you see democracy sliding out of their hands. Because we know the Arabs do not live off democracy. We know China does not live off of a democratic society. We know Russia do not live off a democratic society. And this is why they are fearing, the Western worlds are, the BRICS rising up, collectively going around, trying to find other countries to come on board and do things not the old-fashioned way, but a new way of trading, doing business, and building each one up. Why not would France be afraid and lose their so-called leverage in African countries with their diamonds and gold and cobalt and everything else that comes out of the ground. Why would not America feel threatened when they sit here and they rape, rob, and pillage a country and take advantage of those when you are taking resources, profiting billions when these countries only see not even hundreds of thousands of dollars? So get excited, brothers and sisters, because even then I am hoping that we will rid ourselves of the Christianity faith, the Islamic faith, and come back to the true spirit God that is. We don't need idols and woods and gold and metals to worship and all that there. All we have to do is stand on righteousness. And when we stand on righteousness, this entity, this powerful force that is, will make way for all of us. But if you live being corrupt, liar, cheater, deceiver, you falling into these old devil worshiping, following these European ways of life, you will always be on the bottom. That is what it is. This is your man, not your boy, bringing you another gold nugget that you can either pick up or you can just kick it aside.
Think about it.